It's so common for paddlers to develop an injury while paddling, whether you're a weekend paddler or you paddle every day. Technique is definitely a major factor. So today I wanted to take a look at the new velocity paddle and talk about ways that you can reduce the risk of injury and improve your technique. So the basic idea behind the velocity is that we wanted to make a paddle that reduces the load on your body and it helps improve the efficiency of your stroke. So let's dive into the 5 basic components of the paddle stroke. Now, I've done a few clips of myself here. We're going to check it out, and I want to explain what I'm doing through each process. So number 1 is reach. Reach is the beginning phase of your stroke, so that's basically just before you plant the paddle into the water. This basically refers to how far in front of your feet you're able to get the paddle, and this really defines how long your stroke is going to be. If you don't have a long reach, then you need to compensate by having a higher stroke rate. Phase 2 is the catch. So this refers to the moment that you put your blade into the water, and this is the most common area for mistakes. Paddlers often start actually paddling before their blade is in the water. So you can tell if you've achieved a good catch if there's no splash, or almost no splash. If there's splash on the back of the blade, then this means you're paddling too soon after putting the paddle in the water and the blade isn't fully submerged yet. If there's splash in front of the blade, then that means you haven't maximized your reach. So basically you could reach further, but you just haven't, and you've put the paddle in early. So an even splash, or even better no splash, means that you've properly placed the paddle into the water and you're locked in at the beginning of the stroke. The catch and reach work hand in hand, so you want to aim for long reach and clean catch. Number 3, we have the power phase. So this part of the stroke is where you put the power onto the paddle. The best way to achieve the most power is using your body weight and using your major muscle groups. So you want to leverage your core and your lats, and you want to lean your body weight over the paddle. So you can tell straight away after you've been paddling if you've been using these larger muscle groups. You'll feel burning in your core, in your lats, and probably your legs as well. You can see here that my bottom arm is straight at my elbow. So basically what I'm trying to do is lever my body weight over the blade using my bottom arm. On the other hand, my top arm is softer and not really pushing down so much on the blade. I like to think of this as my guiding arm, so just to position the angle of the blade rather than putting pressure down. Notice here, halfway through the stroke, you can notice how deep the blade goes into the water. So try to always get at least the entire blade into the water, if not more. If you can only get half your paddle blade into the water, then you may not be leveraging those bigger muscle groups. Or try a smaller blade or a longer paddle. A lot of the time during this power phase of the stroke, you'll see paddlers bending over a lot. I don't like to do this too much, it's needed, but it puts a lot of pressure on your lower back if you do it incorrectly. So instead, target these major muscle groups. And if you need to get lower, I recommend to bend at the knees. Have soft knees, and this also helps in choppy conditions. You can kind of balance the ocean movements through your knees rather than twisting at your lower back. Some tips to avoid injury. So if you feel pressure on your lower back, try instead bending your knees. If you feel pressure in the middle of your back, then this is probably a posture thing. So try videoing yourself from the side like I've done here and check your posture. If your upper back and shoulders are hurting, then this is probably due to your paddle length. So try either cutting your paddle down a little bit or make sure that your elbows and your hand aren't too far above your shoulders. So the release phase of your paddle stroke isn't talked about very much, but it's also very important. In these 3 clips, I'm paddling at 3 different speeds. Notice where I take the blade out of the water. So I like to shorten my stroke from the back when I paddle faster, rather than sacrificing my reach. So in a longer and slower paddle pace, I like to have a little bit more time to recover at the end of my stroke, so I like to let the paddle drift a little bit past my ankles. When I'm paddling at like a 3/4 pace, say for like a 10-kilometer race, then my paddle will be just slightly past my ankles. And then when I sprint, I like to take my paddle right out at my ankles. So basically, in these parts of the strokes, anything in front of your ankles, the paddle's going to be at a positive angle, so that's going to accelerate the board forwards. Anything past the ankle, the paddle goes into the negative angle. So for me, even though I like to paddle behind my ankles, I'm not really putting a lot of pressure on the blade when I'm at this negative angle. I'm stopping the power at the point of my ankles, and then this is just giving me a bit of extra time to recover. So there's a few things to keep in mind when you pull the paddle out of the water at the release phase. If you release your blade too early, you're going to lose a little bit of glide. Releasing too late, and you're not really maximizing the power phase, you're not getting the positive angles that you need when paddling. The release should always be clean, just as the catch is clean. If you have splashing during your release, this stops the board from gliding. So water splashing from the back of the blade means that you're shoveling, or you're keeping the power on too long in your stroke. The best is to try to get the least amount of splashes you can. During this phase, I recommend to do what's called feathering the paddle. Feathering basically just means turning the paddle sideways. So feathering the paddle really helps with aerodynamics when you're getting back to the first stage of your stroke. And also if you hit the water, it doesn't slow you down as much because the paddle's slicing through the water rather than taking a chunk out of it. So for fun here, you can see what would happen if I feather my stroke versus don't feather my stroke. So basically what you want to do is bring your elbow out and let your wrist follow naturally. At the same time, you want to drop your top hand so you get more clearance from the water. So a few injury tips here. Sore wrists indicate that you're bending your wrists rather than bringing your elbow out. So try leading with your elbow first and dropping your top hand down to the side. Sore shoulders and sore elbows indicate that you could be trying to lift the paddle too high out of the water. Try rather to take a wider path with your paddle and drop your hand further down rather than reaching up. So some new key features about the Velocity. Firstly, we have this winglet design, which is a feature that was borrowed knowledge from the foil department. Basically, it creates a more efficient paddle. It's going to be cleaner when going into the water, but the biggest pro about that winglet is it really helps to stop the fluttering when the paddle is pulled through the power phase of the stroke. So you're going to have a cleaner and more direct paddle when you go through the water. The blade features a double concave design, and the concaves are quite flat on the blade. So that also helps you to get a really clean catch and a clean release, and it helps to evenly distribute the power across the blade. The angle of the Velocity is set at 14.3 degrees, and so that's quite a large angle for a paddle, and that means that you can have a longer stroke with more positive angles. So you're going to be keeping the acceleration going, and you can use a longer stroke with this blade. Anyway, I'm really excited about this new Velocity paddle. I hope that this video and the paddle help to improve your technique and take your paddling to the next step.